لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم. وبعد, to proceed, resuming with our readings from the booklet Mukhtasar Minhaaj Al-Qaasideen. The path towards the hereafter, of those treading that path, that this is a booklet laying it out for us, O fellow brothers. And it's speaking concerning the adab and the etiquette and the mannerism and our behavior with our Lord foremost. Then secondly, our behavior with the people. And it is written by Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, who died in the year 689 of the Hijri calendar. So we resume our readings, for where he speaks concerning the topic of what is found in man of desires. There's two desires found in the person: the desire for food and drink, and also the desire for the opposite gender. So these two desires, they stand out in the affair of Bani Adam. And with these characteristics, they're different from the malaika. The scholars have mentioned that this is from the greatest of trials, of what taklif is based upon, that man is trialed with his desire. Here it says, the shahwatul batan wa shahwatul farj, the desire that man has for food and drink, and also the desire that man has for the opposite gender, and also vice versa for the woman. So we have completed the topic from last week regarding how one's desire for food and drink could lead to his downfall. And now we're going to speak the desire for the opposite gender, as well as this has come in a hadith, that those who could preserve ma bayna fakhidai, who can preserve and safeguard what is between his thighs, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him with Jannah. And it comes of wordings that man yadman ma bayna lihyay wa ma bayna fakhidai adman lahu al-Jannah. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that whoever can guarantee for me what is between his two jawbones, that he safeguards his tongue, and this is going to come. And also to safeguard his private parts from that which is unlawful, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the believers. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى فُرُوجِهِمْ حَافِظُونَ إِلَّا عَلَى أَزْوَاجِهِمْ أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُهُم. So the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions concerning the believers, the characteristics that they are those who safeguard their private parts except for what Allah has permitted. So this one, he speaks starting why this trial is found in a human being in the first place. Because we know for every trial there's a wisdom therein. And also there are benefits that lie therein. Because a person would ask, why were the humans not made like angels and not having desires for food and drink, and also desires for the opposite gender? So we're going to read some of these words of Ibn Qudama. He says, وَأَمَّا شَهْوَةُ الْفَرْجِ فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ شَهْوَةَ الْوِقَاعِ سُلِّطَتْ عَلَى الْآدَمِ لِفَائِدَتَيْنِ. He says, as for the sexual desire, it was originally created in man for two reasons. إِحْدَاهُمَا بَقَاءُ النَّسَلِ. So the first, or one of the reasons, is for the continuation of human reproduction. وَثَانِيَهَا أو وَالثَّانِيَةَ لِيُدْرِكْ لَذَّةً يَقِيسُ عَلَيْهَا لَذَّاتِ الْآخِرَةِ. So the second reason for man to have a special form of pleasure through which he could conceive the pleasure of the hereafter. Pay attention, that you just getting a small glimpse of pleasure of this worldly life, and also this relates to the pleasure for food and drink. This is just a small glimpse of the pleasure in the hereafter. Because from the reward that is given to a person in the next life, it is having spouses of the most beautiful of type, and also in that which is great in number for him. So he was given this desire for the opposite gender for two main reasons. One, to have the human nasl, the progeny of human beings, to be what is continuous. So next reason, it is to have a glimpse of just the pleasure of what would be found in the hereafter. And here he's going to mention that with these benefits, it comes a trial. It comes a trial. He says, إلا أنه إذا لم ترد هذه الشهوة إلى الاعتدال جلبت آفات كثيرة ومحنا ولولا ذلك ما كان النساء حبائل الشيطان. So, commenting on these words of Ibn Qudama, that he mentions, if this desire that is found in man, it is not satisfied in a moderate manner, it could lead him to numerous of tribulations and trials. For this reason, women are the ropes of the devils. And this is a hadith that some scholars authenticate, but from what I call, Shaykh Albani declares it to be weak. An-nisa habailu shaitan. Women are the ropes for the devil. And some of them have explained with the hadith of Jabir, Sahih Muslim, Al-mar'a tuqbil fi surat al-shaytan. The woman, she comes in the form of the devil with her temptation, meaning with her temptation for the man. وفي الحديث أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ما تركت في الناس بعدي فتنة أضر على الرجال من النساء. And also in the hadith, that's in Bukhari Muslim, hadith Usam bin Zayd, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم says, I have not left behind in the midst of a people after me a trial that is more harmful to men than women. So in specific to men, the greatest of trial is women. It is greater than his love and his passion for wealth, they say. And it leads him to so much. It leads him to so much. For this reason, the Prophet ﷺ says, يعني ما رأيت ناقصات عقل ودين أذهب للب الرجل الحازم من إحداكن. I haven't seen those who are deficient in intellect and also in religion that could remove the demeanor or the strong determination of an upright thinking man like you do, meaning the woman. That a man could be a man of upright affair. You could see he's strong amongst all of his friends. He has a strong personality, but one woman could break him in his character and how he is, and even in his emotions. So this is what is in reference to. And this temptation, it is real, oh fellow brothers. The fitna of women, it's not only mainly in the affair of their beauty and their temptation, but as well in how they could persuade a man to make decisions. And they say the first of that affair was Hawa to Adam, our mother, Hawa, the story of Adam and Eve. As it comes in hadith in Sahih Muslim, لولا حواء لم تخن امرأة زوجها قط. If it wasn't for Hawa, a woman would not have been in a matter of inclining to something that is not of what is of goodness. So we see that the woman at times could even have an impact on a man making right decisions. You find that you ask the person, why did you make such decisions in your life? He says, my wife. You ask him, why did you make this decision? He says, my mom. Am I making decisions? He says, a female in his household pressured him. So we're not degrading the opinions and the affairs that women could give. For verily, consultation with women at times could be extremely beneficial. And for this reason, the Prophet ﷺ would consult with his wife, Khadija. He would consult with his wife, Khadija. So overall, the women, they could be of better opinion of uprightness than a man, generally speaking at times. But at times where they're taken by emotions, they could fall into this path of their mother, Hawa, of having an impact on a man of what he makes of decisions in life. Decisions of life. So this is the fitna that's related here. Also, وقال بعض الصالحين لو ائتمنني رجل على بيت مال لظننت أن أؤدي إليه الأمانة ولو ائتمني على زنجية أخلو بها ساعة واحدة ما ائتمنت نفسي عليها. And this is attributed to Sa'id ibn Musayyib, that he said, if a man were to entrust me with a great amount of wealth, he said, I'll find myself that I'll be able to fulfill the responsibility and the trust and give that wealth. But if someone were to entrust me with a woman, even a woman, he says, that is not that which of his type of attraction, and he were to just remain just the smallest of time periods with her, he wouldn't find himself that he could be what you refer to as being ameen, trustworthy concerning it. So this is to show you the fitna of women even to righteous men. وعن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يخلون رجل بامرأة فإن ثالثهما الشيطان. And also on the Prophet's statement that here in the tahqiq of it, it mentions that it's from hadith Umar ibn Khattab, and also it comes on another Sahabi, Bukhari Muslim, Ibn Abbas, that let not one man remain with a woman alone in seclusion, for verily the third of them will be shaitan. And this shows you the impact of it. And sometimes people confuse that this is only if you were to be in a locked room with a woman. That some scholars have expanded this hadith to being saying that the khalwa online at times could be more detrimental and more harmful than the khalwa offline. People behind these devices and private messaging back and forth with women at times, and just having what they feel of whatever they can say and do, at times it could have more of an impact on the man of desires and lusts than even affairs of offline. So it could be depending on the scenario. In all cases, a person must realize that the fitna in women is great. Never be too confident in yourself. Never be too confident in yourself. And this is the weakness in man. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Some of the scholars of tafsir, when they gave the explanation or the exegesis of the ayah that man has been created weak, they said, Sufyan al-Thawri says, his weakness of that he has an inclination for women, at times he may not control. He has a weakness for women, at times he may not control. This is the weakness in man. So it is a trial indeed. Then he says, وَقَدْ يَنْتَهِي الْإِفْرَاطِ فِي هَذِهِ الشَّهْوَةِ حَتَّى تُصْرَفْ همة الرجل إلى كثرة التمتع بالنساء فيشغله عن ذكر الآخرة. And this is another affair, that this desire could lead a man being into his goal, just into having enjoyment with women, and his goal of being so concerned about the woman that he's going to be married to, and his life with her, and even his affairs of how he's going to increase of women. This all becomes on his mind, and it perhaps may distract him from doing dhikr for the akhirah, thinking about the akhirah. So this is a temptation that's related here. And at times he says, وَرُبَّمَا آلَ إِلَى الْفَوَاحِشِ, it can lead to indecency, acts of indecency. وَقَدْ تَنْتَهِي, and even this could start, as they say, نَظْرَةٌ فَابْتِسَامٌ فَكَلَامٌ فَالسَّلَامٌ فَلِقَاءٌ فَمَوْعِدٌ فَلِقَاءٌ. Some well-known statements that the stages of how shaitan leads you to the act of indecency with women, perhaps it starts with a glance, then a smile, then salam, then speech, then making a time to see each other, then after that, the affair of indecency. So it leads, khutuwat, the shaitan pulls men in footsteps. وَقَدْ تَنْتَهِي بِصَاحِبِهَا إِلَى الْعِشْقِ, and it could lead a man to having this obsession of his love for women. And it reaches the level of an obsession. You can find that. It can reach to a matter that he has so much love that it is more like, not like a natural love or a love of romance, but it's a love of obsession to a woman in his life. So this could even lead to what we find of negative effects of mental illnesses. That if a relationship, a breakup were to happen, he would be down, emotionally depressed. And we've seen this. These are real life matters, that love should not reach to this excessiveness. It should not reach this level of excessiveness. وَهِيَ أَقْبَحُ الشَّهَوَاتِ وَأَجْدَرُهَا أَنْ يَسْتَحْيِيَ مِنْهُ. And it is the worst of, the most repugnant of desires, he says. And it is worthy for a person to be shy of. وَقَدْ يَقَعْ عِنْدَ كَثِيرٍ مِنَ النَّاسِ عِشْقُ الْمَالِ وَالْجَاهِ وَاللَّعِبِ بِالنَّرْدِ وَالشَّطْرَنْجِ وَالطُّنْبُورِ وغير ذلك فتستولي هذه الأشياء على القلوب فلا يصبرون عنها. So he says, this type of love for women is repugnant, that a person can reach to a level of obsession. And also he says this love could even happen for one's love for his property and his wealth. Like some people, the way they love their car, it's not a love that's natural, of a natural desire. It's more like a love of that he's infatuated in it. He's obsessed with it. So this could be a reason of his downfall. Wal-jah, and also maybe his career or his job title. Some people have an obsession to that. And some people, all day long, they speak about the job they have. It's not a normal affair. It's coming from and it's a feeling inside of ishq, O fellow brothers. And Al-Qayyim, when he speaks in the book Da' wad-Dawa, we've taken it, he has a whole chapter about how destructive infatuated love is of ishq. That people could love to an extreme. Love to an extreme. وَاللَّعِبْ بِالنَّرْدِ وَالشَّطْرَنْجِ وَالطُّنْبُورِ. Maybe our brother can explain us some of these, Chess. Some of them chess, okay? Dice? Okay. And these type of games, oh fellow brothers, the cards and stuff, they're very addictive. Some people could lose sleep on these games. It can be so much that people would be so excited. Their emotions could be on these games. And they can be infatuated and obsessed regarding these things that they'll have dreams about it, dreams about these games. You know, like the people playing, I think, with the dominoes and these games, it can be overwhelming. And it is so true. Wallahi, we found some people, and I think the World Health Organization, WHO, has mentioned that it is a real illness of an addiction to games. Addiction to games. So people actually suffer from this. So they cannot get off them. And this is why we find even children that will lock themselves in rooms based upon this. It's based upon ishq. It's based upon ishq. And it's something that he even needs counseling for, just to get off them. Counseling. They can't just get off them easily. Some people even play these phone games just to relieve their emotions. If he's going through moments of difficulties, you just see him, he's on his phone touching something. And he's not really into the game. He just, you ask him, why are you doing so? He says, I do it to relieve my emotions, or of a boredom, or something that they find that they can't get their fingers off. It's even without no qasd, just open it to touch it. So sometimes this could be not more like a habit, but it becomes an addiction. ويسهل الاحتراز عن ذلك في بدايات الأمور فإن آخرها يفتقر إلى علاج شديد. He says the way that a person could safeguard himself from these affairs is at the very beginning. Once it starts, you see the symptoms of these affairs, to cut its roots at the beginning. He says, for verily later on, when you try to solve the problem, you require ilajun shadid. It requires a lot of treatment. It's not easy to deal with later on. So, وَقَدْ لَا يَنْجَعْ. Even sometimes treatment in those scenarios cannot benefit. You find he grew up on these games perhaps, or these addictions that he has, and even when he's old, and he's 30 years old, 40 years old, and he's still just obsessed with them. And you find that he lacks in so much affairs of the worldly life, employment, or these other affairs. One of the real causes is these affairs that he's addicted to. ومثاله من يصرف عنان الدابة عند توجهها إلى باب تريد دخوله فما أهون منعها بصرف عنانها ومثال من يعالجه بعد استحكامه. He says the example, it is like the parable how to deal with these things, is the moment you find that your riding animal is inclining to an entrance point that it wants to enter, you quickly divert it. This is how you have to deal with these things. Whenever you feel these feelings, distract yourself with something else. So all these addictions that people have, if he has an addiction to look at something constantly, try to distract your mind by looking at somewhere else. You have to do that. If you allow yourself to constantly look into these affairs, even some people, they suffer from addiction of different types of YouTube or certain social media, that once they get on these things, they can't get off. They can't get off. And one channel leads them to another channel, and then another channel. He finds that he's delayed on the salat, he's missing this affair, missing that affair, and then at the end it was nothing really productive. Nothing productive. So you have to try to distract yourself. Maybe do the physical activities, sports at times. Go read something that is productive in this life or the next life. Go spend quality time or with family members. Switching it up distracts you from these infatuated things that a person has that drives him. He He said, at that time, it is so easy just to distract yourself. But later on, when you're suffering and you're overwhelmed with those desires that have taken control, it's hard to treat yourself. ومثال من يتركها حتى تدخل الباب وتجاوزه ثم يأخذ بذنبها, I think that's the word, يجرها إلى وراء وما أعظم التفاوت بين الأمرين. This is a beautiful parable. They said بالمثال يتضح المقال. With striking examples, the speech becomes clear. He's just giving an example of someone, he allows his mount or his riding animal to lead him to a specific area that he knows it's the gray zone for him. So one person comes and directs his riding animal to another route, so he's saved. Another one lets his animal or riding beast direct him to that area, and then later on he wants to grab it by its tail and go backwards. It's a mission now. You have to pull it by its tail to get back, and this is very difficult. So this is the example of how some people are, that they want to treat themselves after they went too deep into what they are suffering from. And that's why a lot of these illnesses that people go through, it requires to be treated at the very beginning. If you find these symptoms, you see these affairs that's happening at the very beginning, treat them at this moment. Even with the affair of desires, if you see that you have an addiction to certain things, try to have some moments where you try to ward yourself off and direct yourself to another means to keep your mind off it before it gets worse. Now he speaks about afatul lisan, the side effects or the defects of the tongue. The tongue is a blessing, oh fellow brothers. It's ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you can constantly move it and it will never be fatigued. It's just always moving. If you were to move your hand, your legs, constantly you get stricken by fatigue. But the tongue, you can always move it, there's no problem. And with this, it comes with a big fitna, big trial. So this ni'mah, they say, some of the scholars said, it's a loaded gun without no safety. It's a loaded gun with no safety. Or some of them says, that to haddain, it's a double-sided sword, the tongue. And lectures and books have been written concerning how to safeguard the tongue. In Yemen, I used to go attend a muhadara of a sheikh, and all I see him speaking about al-lisan, 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 safeguard the tongue. I go to another lecture of another sheikh, speaking about al-lisan, al-lisan, safeguard your tongue. I said, subhanAllah, why is everyone speaking about this topic, the tongue? We don't realize how destructive the tongue could be if it's misused. So here he's going to speak about that. آفاته كثيرة متنوعة. He said its defects, they're numerous and there are various of types. ولها في القلب حلاوة. And it has, these defects, it has a sweetness in the heart. Meaning there's things that drive you to these negativities that the tongue pulls you to. وَلَهَا بَوَاعِث مِنَ الطَّبْعِ. And it has things that motivates. And there's interior motives naturally that drive the person to do certain things with his tongue. وَلَا نَجَاةَ مِنْ خَطْرِهَا إِلَّا بِالصَّمْتِ. He said there's no way to have salvation from the tongue except remaining silent. That's why comes the hadith of Uqba, Man samata naja. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever adheres to silence a lot, he'll attain salvation. The scholars here is rarely to find someone being blamed for being quiet. As-samt it saves you, brothers. It saves you a lot of times. And we find the hadith, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, then let him speak good or remain silent. Some of the scholars, they say wisdom is made of 10 affairs. They said 9 of them is in silence. They said wisdom is built upon 10 affairs. 9 of them is in silence. You read this one, what's the first one? It has to do with silence. The second one has to do with silence. The third one has to do with silence. 9 of them has to do with silence. So silence, if you find that person is silent a lot, wallah, is a good character. Nowadays, people are rebuked for being quiet or is being silent and not being talkative. And this is unfortunate. فلنذكر أولا فضيلة الصمت ثم نتبعه بذكر الآفات مفصلة إن شاء الله تعالى. He said, let's start off by mentioning some of the merits of silence. Then we're going to mention the side effects or the defects that come with being so talkative. He says, اعلم أن الصمت يجمع الهم ويفرغ الفكر. He says, have knowledge of certainty that silence, it brings together your worries. And some people's worries, it's all over the place. Some people, when their humum is mushattata, when their worries of life, it's all over the place, that's even, it has an impact upon them. And he says, وَيُفْرِغْ الْفِكْر, meaning it empties the thoughts. Because you have this moment of silence, it's a healing to the mind, they say. وفي الحديث أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من يضمن لي ما بين لحيي, it says with fatha, وما بين رجلي أضمن له الجنة. That whoever guarantees for me what is between his 2 jawbones and between his 2 legs, then I will guarantee for him paradise. وفي حديث آخر لا يستقيم إيمان عبد حتى يستقيم قلبه ولا يستقيم قلبه حتى يستقيم لسانه. That a person's iman of a slave will not be upright until his heart becomes upright. And his heart will not be upright until his tongue becomes upright. And they say the tongue, start with your tongue. Fix your tongue and then you'll notice your heart will become purified. And there then, the iman goes along with it. وفي حديث معاذ في آخره, and also in a hadith Mu'adh, that comes in 40 نووية, 40 hadith, كف عليك هذا. فقلت يا رسول الله وإنا لمؤاخذون بما نتكلم به. The Prophet ﷺ told Mu'adh ibn Jabal, restrain this. And he pointed to his tongue. So he said, O Messenger of Allah, are we held responsible for what we say? قال ثكلتك أمك يا معاذ. And this is like a word of that you're drawing attention to the person and you want him to realize what is going to be mentioned. It's like an expression. وهل يكب الناس في النار على وجوههم أو قال على مناخرهم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم. He says, doesn't what brings people to the hellfire, face first, cast them to the hellfire, or on their nose, or except the heart, what their tongues have harvested. And that it comes in narration that some of the scholars authenticate for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. He once grabbed his tongue, and he says, هذا أوردني الموارد. He grabbed his own tongue, and he says, this is what has brought me to scenarios that was extremely destructive. It could lead you to your downfall. A man, إن الرجل لا يتكلم بكلمة لا يلقي لها بالا يهوي بها فِي النَّارُ 70 خَرِيفًا. A man may say one word. He doesn't pay a lot of attention to what is the consequence of that word, and he falls to the hellfire 70 خَرِيفًا. And someone says 70 years. Just for one kalima. Can you imagine like the amount of words we used to say? For this reason, some of the Salaf al-Salih, they wouldn't speak a lot. They would be able to count the amount of words they would say in one day. They'll be so cautious on their words that they would be able to count their words in a day. And what hits people the most is the idle talk, ikhwah. The laghu. A lot of times the idle talk and excessive speech leads people to saying things that they regret later on. وفي حديث آخر من كف لسانه ستر الله عورته. And whoever restrains his tongue, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will conceal his faults for him. Conceal his faults. And this is a hadith mentioned, but Shaykh Al-Albani declares it weak. And maybe the brothers might remind us of those poetry. يعني some of them they say احذر لسانك أيها الإنسان لا يلدغنك إنه ثعبان. Be aware, O man, of your own tongue, for verily it's like a cobra or like a snake. At any moment it could lash at you. And then it mentions كم من قتيل يعني كم من رجل قتيل شجاع قد دفنته لسانه, or some of those words, like how many people they're buried in the graveyard because of their tongues. Because of their tongues. And it led people to say things of, meaning that it led to spiritually being killed, and also of words of regret. And then it mentions وقال ابن سعود ما شيء أحوج إلى طول سجن من لسان. There's nothing that deserves to be, more is a need to be imprisoned for a long time than the tongue. Some of the scholars, they say that the tongue, it's not easily, it could be open. They say they have the lips as a covering, the first covering. Then they have the teeth. And even some of them say that you have 32 teeth to think 32 times before you say something, which Allah knows best. But you should be one that is cautious of what you say. They say if you say something, al-kalima tamlikuha, the words, you own the words before it comes out. فَإِذَا خَرَجَتْ هِيَ تَمْلِكُكَ. But when it comes out, it owns you. It could either make you or break you. And that's how destructive the matter is. Wallahi, how much times we would say something and then we look back and we regret saying it. It put us in scenarios. It led us to our hearts being hardened. You're in a sitting here gathering, you're just talking. You come out of the gathering and you feel like your iman decreased. And this is what it's referring to, brothers. The tongue has a huge impact. قال أبو درداء أنصف أذنيك من فيك فإنما جعلت لك أذنان وفم واحد لتسمع أكثر مما تتكلم به. Here, be just. If you're going to be a fair trade and fair distribution, realize that you have been given 2 ears to listen more than to speak, because you've been given 1 month, he says. So if you want to be fair to your ears, listen more than you speak. That's what he's saying. So it's very important that we understand. That's how the scholars were in the past. They weren't concerned of being the one that's speaking. At times you come into a gathering where there's a number of people there, and you wouldn't recognize the scholar amongst them because of how quiet he is. You would assume someone else is a scholar, that's one being so talkative, or that person being so talkative. And then they point and say, this is the sheikh. And you look and say, subhanAllah, this person's so quiet and humble. And they don't speak unless it's needed. They don't speak unless it's needed. وقال مخلد بن حسين ما تكلمت منذ 50 سنة بكلمة أريد أن أعتذر منها. Makhlad ibn Hussein, one of the narrators of hadith, he said, I did not speak of a word for 50 years that I had to apologize for. And there comes a hadith, I believe hadith Abi Ayyub, authenticated by Shaykh Albani, comes in the Sunan, إياكم مما يعتذر منه. Or he said, لا تتكلم بكلام تعتذر منه غدا. The Prophet said, don't speak of words that you need to apologize for tomorrow. How many times it happens? People speak with even vague words. Allah says, يَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. Oh, you believe, fear Allah, and say words that are straight to the point. مُسْتَقِيمًا. Ibn Kathir says that is مُسْتَقِيمًا لَا عِوَجَاجَ فِيهِ. It's straight to the point. There's no confusion on what you meant. You don't have to come and clarify yourself. I said something and now I need to clarify what I meant. You should not be like that. They said, إِن لَمْ تَجِدْ قَوْلًا تَقُلْهُ فَصَمْتُكَ عَنْ غَيْرِ السَّدِيدِ سَدَادُ. If you don't have anything good, straightforward to say of what is clear, then your silence from not something, from bad speech is uprightness. And that's why Imam Shafi'i, when he was explaining the hadith, مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, let him speak good or remain silent. He says, if you're doubtful, if it's good or if it's not good, then it's better to remain silent. You know that there's some good in it, but you don't know if the goodness is greater. He says, better to remain silent. Better to remain silent. And a lot of times, it is the speech of gossip that leads a lot of people into. The qila wa qal, he said, she said. This is naturally what people are inclined to, but it's something that is destructive. And people passing on what other people have said and so on and so forth. This at times could be that which is the Prophet ﷺ says, where he asked his companions, do you know what is al-adhu? And then they said, oh no, Messenger of Allah. He said, it's a qala bayna nas, it's gossip between the people. It's that what destroys a lot of the people. So this comes with the tongue. And they said also with the affair of the tongue, is speaking about the deen of Allah with no knowledge. And speaking of the deen of Allah with no knowledge. And this is from the greatest of crimes in Islam. That the brothers permit for us to take some of the negative factors in speech. The negative factors in speech. Take a little bit more, inshallah. Al-afatul ula, al-kalam fima la ya'ni. The first defect of speech, it is speaking of that which is ma la ya'ni. As the Somalis they say, is doesn't concern him. Min husn al-islam al-mar' tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. From the excellence of a person's Islam is to leave off what doesn't concern him. He's talking to you about something that you and him totally agree that it doesn't concern him. And you're probably having an argument with him about it. You're going back and forth. And he says, well, I just wasted an hour arguing with you about this. It doesn't concern me or you. It doesn't benefit me in my dunya. It doesn't benefit me in the akhirah. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. And we're just going back and forth about it. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ مَنْ عَرَفَ قَدْرَ زَمَانِهِ وَأَنَّهُ رَأْسُ مَالِهِ لَمْ يُنْفِقْهُ إِلَّا فِي فَائِدَةٍ. He said, have knowledge of certainty, the one who knows the value of his time, and that it's the most precious of wealth to him. He won't spend it except that which is productive. وَهَذِهِ الْمَعْرِفَةِ تُوجِبْ حَبْسُ اللِّسَانِ عَنِ الْكَلَامِ فِي مَا لَا يَعْنِيهِ. That's why we met people, the moment we start to engage in speech that he doesn't really find that there's much interest in him for it, of dunya or akhirah, you just find that he excuses himself. And you think, like, subhanAllah, why is this person leaving? He just maybe say a few words, I have to go, and then he excuses himself. Because there's no interest in it for him. There's nothing productive. It's more like idle talk for him. لأنه من ترك ذكر الله تعالى واشتغل بمباح لا يعني كان كمن قدر على أخذ جوهرة فأخذ عوضها مدرة وهذا خسران العمر. يعني he says people that abandon the remembrance of Allah and be preoccupied with something that is allowable to speak of speech but it doesn't concern him, is like someone that had the possibility of getting something precious of pearls and diamonds, and then in place of that he went to get a piece of mud on the floor. So this is the loss of lifespans. And you could have done something really productive at that time period. And they say, it comes authentically on Umar al-Khattab, ذِكْرُ النَّاسِ دَاء وَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ دَوَاء. Mentioning the people, talking about the people, it's a disease. And speaking about Allah is a cure. Wallahi, no matter who you're speaking about, when you find yourself just talking about people, it's overwhelming, it has impact. You look at yourself in the mirror afterwards, you say, SubhanAllah, you even have an impact on how you look. And he's just talking about people, it's not healthy for our brothers. وفي الحديث الصحيح أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من حسن الإسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. And here he deems this hadith to be authentic. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, from the excellence of a person's Islam is to abandon what doesn't concern him. وقيل للقمان الحكيم ما بلغ من حكمتك قال لا أسأل عما كفيته ولا تكلم بما لا يعنيني. He says, people ask Luqman al-Hakim, that wise person, a whole surah has been revealed about. What has reached of your wisdom? He says, I don't ask about what I've been sufficed. He doesn't ask about something that he's been sufficed. Someone already asked, or someone, sufficed him. And he says, I don't burden myself about something that doesn't concern me. You find that he's intervening. He interferes in various scenarios of life, and he has لا له ناقة ولا جمل, they say. He has nothing of what would be a benefit to him in there. وروي أنه دخل على داود عليه السلام وهو يسرد درعا فجعل يتعجب مما رأى فأراد أن يسأله عن ذلك فمنعته حكمته فأمسك فلما فرغ داود عليه السلام قام ولبس الدرع ثم قال نعم الدرع للحرب فقال لقمان الصمت حكم وقليل فاعله. It comes that Luqman al-Hakim entered upon the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam while he was laying out his armory, and Luqman al-Hakim was amazed, astonished about what he's seen, so he wanted to ask about it. Then he said, and then in his inner self, his wisdom prevented him. And then Luqman after that mentions silence is wisdom, and few of the people carry it out. And sometimes we stop a person, we start asking him something about his belongings, properties, and we go on and on talking with him, and we come out, we realize that didn't even concern us at all. We just wasted maybe like 10 minutes talking to someone about something that didn't benefit us. طيب الآفة الثانية الخوض في الباطل. The second defect of speech, it is engaging in things of evil or false affairs. وهو في الكلام في المعاصي كذكر مجالس الخمر ومقامات الفساق. It is like speech regarding sins. People speaking about things, like here, for example, of alcohol or positionings of sinners. وأنواع الباطل كثيرة, and the types of falsehood is numerous. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن العبد لا يتكلم بالكلمة ينزل بها في النار أبعد ما بين المشرق والمغرب. That a person may speak of a word, that he descends by way of it to the hellfire, that which is further than between the east and the west. SubhanAllah. We need to check the measurements, the distance between the east and the west, brothers. That is a huge distance. One word could make you drop that distance to the hellfire. And that's why it's very scary, especially speaking about people. The fear of speaking about people. It comes in Mustadrak al-Hakim that a woman used to fast the days and she would stand the nights in Qiyam al-Layl. وَلَكِنْ كَانَ تُؤْذِي جَارَهَا بِلِسَانِهَا. She used to harm her neighbor with her tongue. So when the Prophet was asked about her, he just said, هِيَ مِنْ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. She's from the inhabitants of the hellfire. And she just fasted days, stand the nights, but she used to talk bad about her neighbors. Right away, the Prophet said, she's from the inhabitants of the hellfire. The tongue, brothers, can lead to the downfall of many. وقريب من ذلك الجدال والمراء وهو كثرة الملاحة للشخص لبيان غلطه وإفحامه والباعث على ذلك الترفع. This happens a lot. What people fall into this is excessive argumentation amongst themselves, maybe even to clarify a person's mistake or to prove him wrong. And he says what drives a lot of people in these affairs is a tarafa, just to show that he's superior. That this person is inferior and I'm superior than him. If you fall into a lot of jidal, argumentation, just to prove your point so you can be looked at, I'm better, then this is praiseworthy. You find out that people, just want to prove someone's error and mistake just so he can display himself as being better than him. Not really just driving him sincerity to correct him and to clarify his misunderstandings, but as I mentioned here by the author, الترفع. فينبغي الإنسان أن ينكر المنكر من القول ويبين الصواب. فإن قبل منه وإلا ترك الممارى. He says, what's appropriate that you warn from evil with your statements and clarify the truth. If it's accepted from him, or else he leaves off argumentation. And why are you arguing back? If you just clarify the truth, if he doesn't accept it, move on. This is what he's mentioning. Imam Malik used to say, عَرِّضِ الْحَقِّ وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنْهُ. Show the people the truth and don't argue for it. You're going back and forth to convince someone that's already convinced. This person is muqim. You're just arguing with him for no reason. Yes, jidal at times, argumentation could be praiseworthy. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. But it has its guidelines. هذا إذا كان الأمر معلقا بالدين. This is if it's related to deen. فأما إذا كان في أمور الدنيا فلا وجه للمجادلة فيه. And this is about the affairs of the deen. Imagine it's about the dunya. He says then it's better off not to argue. You're arguing with someone outside. People arguing at the bus stops for things that are insignificant. People are arguing about the slightest of affairs for road rage. This affair, that affair. You find that it's not needed. You could have just left that off. It's a better characteristic to abandon. وعلاج هذه الآفة بكسر الكبر الباعث على إظهار الفضل وأعظم من المراء الخصومة فإنها أمر زائد على المراء. So the way to treat this, it is to break the bone of pride that's found in you. That's found in you, that a lot of people are driven to pride that makes them inclined to this affair. And it leads them to display how superior they are. And he said, what's worse than this type of argumentation or a debate? It is like severe quarreling, al-khusuma, when people quarrel and they're very quarrelsome. وعن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And they say the origin in man that he's argumentative. Who give us an ayah that the origin that man is argumentative? Give us an ayah, brothers. Okay. وكان الإنسان أكثر شيء جدلا. the man is, most of the time he's quarrelsome. The majority of his scenario is arguing. And this ayah was revealed in a certain scenario. Some of the brothers know the incident. But this is just to show that it requires jihad nafs. You have to fight against this bad quality. A lot of times you want to argue. That's why there's such a great reward for the one who leaves off on argumentation and he could win it for the sake of Allah. يعني من ترك المراء وهو قادر أن ينفذ دعاه الله على رؤوس الخلائق يخيره من حور العين ما شاء. Hadith Abi Umama, I think, that whoever leaves off argumentation, despite him being capable of proving his points, Allah will call him out على رؤوس الخلائق, in front of all of the creation, إن الأولين والآخرين, the first of creation, the last of them, and tell him to choose from حور العين of whichever he wants. Yani this is the greatest of honor. Just for one argument that you left off for the sake of Allah. Yani you know, I'm leaving this argument off despite being capable of proving my point. Not leaving off argument where you can't prove your point. Some people misunderstand. But it's an argument that you know you can prove yourself and make yourself look more superior. But you left it off for the sake of Allah. And then he mentions the hadith Aisha, as in Bukhari Muslim. أبغض الرجال إلى الله الألد الخصم. We must memorize this hadith with the brothers one time. Short hadith. Bukhari Muslim. أبغض الرجال إلى الله الألد الخصم. يعني the most hated of men in the sight of Allah is the quarrelsome, argumentative individual. Every time you look at him, you find that he's arguing. I remember in Yemen, we see one student knowledge. Every time you look at him, you find him he's arguing with someone. He's arguing here, he's arguing there. I said, this is a bad characteristic. You have to pull the person aside and say, brother, wherever we take you, you're arguing with someone. So this is a bad characteristic. وَهَذِهِ الْخُصُومَةِ نَعْنِي بِهَا الْخُصُومَ بِالْبَاطِلِ أو بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. He says what we intended here of quarrelsome, it is regarding falsehood, if you're wrong or without knowledge. فأما من له حق فالأولى أن يصدف عن الخصومة مهما أمكن لأنها توغر الصدر وتهيج الغضب وتورث الحقد وتخرج إلى تنازل العرض أو تناول العرض. And as for the one who has the truth, it's better for him to try to divert himself from quarreling with others if it's possible, because it leaves an impact on the chest, in the chest of the person. And it brings out anger. And it also brings out malice. Not just anger, but this you attain this malice for a person just from one argument. And it even leads to people assassinating each other's character. Now he mentioned the next defect. الآفة الثالثة التقعر في الكلام وذلك يكون بالتشدق وتكلف السجع. And this one, we're going to need the translation of the booklet for this one. This is terminologies that have specific meanings. Because we're speaking about the flaws of speech, we need to be exact. I didn't translate, but it basically means to overburden yourself and your expressions. That you try to carry yourself in your words, not things that are not really natural. Some people, like you see from themselves, as if they're an imposter in their words or how they're talking, the way they carry themselves. Like, if you see how he regularly speaks, and then you see how he's carrying up something, you see, like, this is totally different. There's not even like something calling for it, but it's more like takalluf. And also gives the example of sajr, Some people, like the Arabs, whenever they speak, they will try to rhyme. And even some people, when they're given a khutbah is just rhyming. This is, you're burdening yourself. If it happens naturally, it's okay. So he says, وعن أبي ثعلبة قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن أبغضكم إلي وأبعدكم مني يوم القيامة مساويكم أخلاقا. The Prophet mentions those who are the most hated of you to me, and the most distant from you يوم القيامة is those who have the worst of character. Then he mentioned الثرثارون المتشدقون المتفيقون. There are the ثرثارون. Some of them ثرثارون. Some of them, they say those who are, they're extremely talkative. Extremely talkative to the point that he's just always excessive. You know, when this person talks, he's not going to end speaking. I mean, this is the meaning. And then it mentions another description, al-mutashaddiqun. Those who, let's find the wording. It says here, those who speak unnecessarily. Something that requires to be brief, he expands the speech. So this is also disliked. Al-mutafayyiqun. These are all characteristics that we may look at now as praiseworthy. People nowadays, they say this person is extremely talkative. This person, he could make a long story, have things in his words. Or this person could like whenever he speaks, you deem it as if he's not a natural and his words are not sincere. Whenever he speaks, you find like he's rehearsed, they say. And you look at this person, you say, did you rehearse this? Let's just speak naturally. So this is what's intended here, that if a person burdens himself, a takalluf, then it's not something that's encouraged. Because now speech is an art, so brothers. Speech is an art. Some people, they learn different ways of speech and they try to burden themselves. And we found people now, they would listen to some particular da'is or sheikhs and they want to mimic him. And every time he speaks, you can see that it's not natural. It's not even close. It's more like he's burdening himself to talk like someone that he isn't. And it has a bad taste, aftertaste on those listening, because they see that this is done out of takalluf. It's not with barakah. It's not out of barakah. Then he mentions here, like with the khatib, some of them, when their wordings, some of them even come with strange wordings. Like some of the people now, when they give a lecture, the people in front of them probably are 9 to 5 people that don't know the best of English, certain words, and he's speaking to them as if he has Oxford students, of university students in front of him, and he's using the strongest of vocabulary. But his goal is to display himself, carry himself in a way. But the people in front of him, many of them probably don't understand that vocabulary. And some of them, even in the translations, some aqeedah books that are for basic people, they're translating with words that you need a dictionary for those words. You need an English dictionary to translate. He says, well, you made aqeedah more complicated for the people. So this is upon us to look at, not to be those who burden ourselves in wordings. And sometimes people they burden themselves with eloquence. They want to be so eloquent. they overdo it, and it takes away from the barakah. It takes away from the barakah. Wallahi, sometimes a person, he doesn't have the best of English, but because he's speaking out of sincerity, he's coming from the heart, it has a greater impact on the people than someone that is so eloquent, but it's just rehearsed and it's not coming out from the heart. So look at that, oh fellow brothers. I don't know if the brothers permit us to take a few more negative, or we'll stop with this inshallah. نكتفي بهذا القدر إن شاء الله. Stop with this amount? Huh? Inshallah, we'll stop with this amount. As it's Jum'ah night, inshallah. We send salat upon the Prophet. And we prepare for that big day tomorrow. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Barakallahu feekum.